So the spoiler is, I didn't invent that. The guy who invented this theory or hypothesis is a guy called Julio Rotemberg, who turns out got his PhD from an institution called Princeton in the early 80s, then went on to become an MIT professor and worked for several decades at Harvard Business School. So he's a guy who said, hey, this whole diversification thing, it sounds great, finance professors, but have you ever realized this is going to kill competition and therefore decrease welfare? Like, it's basically killing the whole point of capitalist systems. So the hypothesis is not new at all. My claim to fame is to have co-authored the first paper that arguably shows that there are situations in which indeed common ownership, that's how we call it, common ownership of competitors causes higher product prices. Okay, and coming up with a whole bunch of examples of industries where that seems to be an issue as well. So let me give you a few examples, right? So before I started working on this, I just thought that the largest shareholder of Microsoft was obviously Bill Gates. I mean, look, everybody knows that, or so I thought. Spoiler, that's wrong. The largest shareholder of Microsoft is Vanguard, followed by BlackRock, okay? And I thought that the largest shareholder of Apple clearly must be Steve Jobs, or I guess Tim Cook. And that just turns out to be completely false as well. The largest shareholder of Apple is Vanguard as well. All right. So that is just a matter of like the scale of the holdings. I mean, once you think about this for a second, you can realize that it can't possibly be true that the CEOs own a large fraction of these firms, right? I mean, look, let's call Apple a $1 trillion company. Holding 10% of that would be 100 billion. And look, Tim Cook is rich, but he's not 100 billion rich, right? So, so once you think about it, you realize that can't be right. But I'm just saying I was wrong before I started working on that. So, you know, all these examples of coming up with industries like airlines or banks or, I don't know, publicly traded waste management companies, this is basically the claim to fame. Now, I should at this point also explain that it's not just the indexers that cause common ownership of competitors. Like Warren Buffett is pretty big in that game, right? So he became the largest shareholder of 3 of the 6 largest banks in America during the financial crisis by generously providing capital for that. These days, he's in the news for a few years ago, having bought large stakes in the 5 largest Japanese trading houses. He was the largest shareholder of 3 of America's largest 6 airlines. So, you know, people call Warren Buffett a stock picker, but what he really does is pick industries and buy the largest stakes in like all the largest players. And it just turns out that, well, so that's one example. Another example, I just mentioned the US waste management industry. Turns out the largest shareholder of one of the publicly traded waste management companies is a investor called Cascade Investments. And you're like, what are you talking about? And the answer is, this is Bill Gates' family office. It's called Cascade Investments. Okay. It also holds close to 5% in the closest competitor. The Bill Gates Foundation owns another 5% in that competitor. So the point is, it's not just indexers that drive common ownership of industries. It's also a bunch of actively managed funds or conglomerates that just deliberately buy up stakes in competitors. And the combination of all of the above appears to have the effect of lessening competition in the sense of driving up product prices. And, you know, that's basically the claim to fame. Since then, there's an entire literature with hundreds of papers that have examined this up and down from one industry to the next, and public policy discussions all over the globe in how one should deal with that issue. Because, yeah, conceptually, right? So again, in practice, one could just go after Bill Gates' family office and Berkshire Hathaway and I don't know what as a start. But conceptually, the problem is that diversification just doesn't go together with competition, right? So that calls for some seriously deep thinking in what the optimal policy would be, and whether we want to allow financialization to continue the way we did so far.